I have never voted for President Obama. Ever. I am a Republican who cursed his name, who falsely accused him, and someone who zealously worked to ensure that he would never be my president. I was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune disease. Now labeled with a pre-existing condition, I am disqualified from any and all health insurance options. Literally a dead man walking. But then this guy signs this bill. And now I have access to health insurance and I receive the care that I so desperately need. I can now say I had a serious autoimmune disease.
It wasn't about Democrats or Republicans. It was about our values as Americans and making sure that hardworking Americans like Brent are no longer locked out of health insurance through no fault of their own.
Stop. Rewind that. Did you catch what just happened? A man who spent years cursing Barack Obama's name, a Republican, someone who actively worked against him, is now sitting in front of a camera telling you that Obama's signature law saved his life. Not a Democrat, not a liberal, a Republican with a pre-existing condition who had zero options until the Affordable Care Act gave him one. That right there is what this entire video is about, because his story is not rare. It is not an exception. There are millions of people across the country, many of them conservative, many of them MAGA voters, who have quietly benefited from this law while loudly calling for it to be destroyed. And today, we are going to walk through exactly how that happened, benefit by benefit, with real people telling you in their own words what this law meant for their lives. So now, let's hear from someone who lived through that door being slammed before the ACA existed to stop it.
There was a time before the Affordable Care Act, and I remember it. Before Obamacare, when you graduated, you had no insurance. You were out on the street. Most likely you didn't have a job yet. Maybe you did. I had a 1099 job, so I didn't have a W-2. So I then had to get my own insurance. I'm like 24 years old-ish, 23, 24. I had had some migraines in college and just a few spatterings of issues here and there. And when I was on my parents' insurance, and when I asked to just like keep the same plan, they denied me due to pre-existing conditions. I applied to several other insurances, all denied me. And I was like a pretty healthy young adult. I just had like migraines. So the only thing I could sign up for was what's called a catastrophic plan. But those plans are like notoriously, they're kind of scammy sometimes. They don't kick in very fast. You don't get much care. So basically, I spent a few years like without solid health insurance, just like hoping nothing happened, hoping nothing went wrong, paying out of pocket for any kind of medication that I needed. Eventually, I got a W-2 job and then I got insurance. So fast forward to a few years later, they have Obamacare.
A catastrophic plan. That's what was left for her. Not real insurance, a plan she herself describes as scammy. One that wouldn't cover therapy, preventive care, or prescriptions, just a thin financial net in case something truly catastrophic happened. And her crime? Migraines. That's it. She was young, otherwise healthy adult who had migraines in college, and that was enough for insurance company after insurance company to look at her application and say no. This is what people forget when they argue about Obamacare in the abstract. They forget that behind every policy debate is a real human being sitting at a kitchen table, opening rejection letter after rejection letter, wondering what happens if something goes wrong. For her, nothing catastrophic happened. She got lucky. Millions of others weren't.
Things that changed in Obamacare. No more denying people for pre-existing conditions, which is so cruel and evil. Like how that was a thing, it's just choosing money over people every time. And, you know, an unregulated business will do that, functionally speaking. They helped women get access to important care. I know for me as a young person, that was really, really vital because I needed, you know, to go to the OBGYN and do all the things that you do. Thank goodness there was like things like Planned Parenthood that women could get access. But before that, like, it was really tricky. This is why the subsidies are important. And this is why Obamacare is important.
She's right. An unregulated business will always choose profit over people, not because the people running it are monsters, but because that's what the incentive structure demands. Without rules, denying sick people is just good business. The Affordable Care Act changes the rules. It said you cannot deny someone coverage because of their health history. You cannot charge them so much it becomes functionally impossible. You cannot drop them when they get too expensive. Nearly 1 in 2 non-elderly Americans have a pre-existing condition: heart disease, diabetes, a prior pregnancy, depression, cancer in remission. Before 2010, every single one of those people was at risk of being locked out. The ACA put a lock on that door permanently, and if you're sitting there thinking, well, that doesn't apply to me, I'm healthy, understand this: you are one diagnosis away from it applying to you. Everyone is.
And frankly, I think Trump has had maybe 9 years to come up with some better idea that he hasn't. And so, unless there's a better idea out there, we need to take care of the system that's in place instead of trying to ruin it.
9 years and counting. That's how long the promise of a replacement plan has been floating around without ever materializing into anything real. Repeal and replace become just repeal. The replacement never came because there is no politically painless way to take away something people depend on. That's not a liberal talking point. That's just math.
So many people out there who are rabidly against Obamacare, which is the exact same thing as the ACA, the actual name of the act is the Affordable Care Act, rely on, and they need so many of the benefits that were put in place due to the ACA. Okay, so prior to the Affordable Care Act passing, aka Obamacare, prior to the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies could kick you off of your parents' insurance the minute you turned 18.
Let's slow down on that because it's easy to breeze past it and miss how brutal it actually was. The moment you turned 18, not graduated, not got a job, just turned 18, you could be removed from your parents' plan. Some schools had plans, but the moment you walked across the graduation stage, those ended too. And your parents technically could keep you on their plan. But at what cost? She said it herself, an exorbitant amount. Most families couldn't afford it. So the vast majority of young Americans at the age when they're most likely to be starting out, most likely to be uninsured, most vulnerable, was simply pushed off the edge and told to figure it out. $150 a month catastrophic plan that essentially covered nothing. That was the safety net for an entire generation of young Americans before the ACA.
18. You were either kicked off of your parents' insurance the minute you turned 18, or if you were on a school plan through your college or your university, you were kicked off of that plan the very second that you graduated. So your parents could sometimes choose to pay an exorbitant amount of money to keep you on their plan, but most people couldn't afford that. And so the vast majority of Americans, myself included, got booted off of our parents' insurance plans the very second we turned 18, and most of us were either completely uninsured or underinsured. Myself, I paid $150 a month for a catastrophic care plan. So basically, if I got turned into a street pizza by a Mack truck, I guess that policy would have paid out for the hospital bill for that. But otherwise, things like therapy, psychiatry, speech therapy, physical therapy, any kind of preventative care, that was totally out. So the fact that people can stay on their parents' insurance until they turn 26, that is because of the ACA. That is because of Obamacare. And people don't seem to realize that. They're like, oh, Obamacare is the worst thing that ever happened to this country. Okay, so I guess you can't keep your kid on your plan after they turn 18. What? No, of course I have to. What are you talking about? They get to stay on my plan until they're 26. These people.
That moment right there, that's the gap. That's the disconnect at the heart of this entire conversation. Someone is genuinely angry about Obamacare, genuinely believes it's destroying the country, and in the same breath, they're confused about why their kid wouldn't be allowed to stay on their plan past 18, because in their mind, those two things are completely unconnected. They're not. They are the exact same law. If your child is under 26 and on your insurance plan right now, that is the ACA. If you have never had to scramble to find coverage for your college-age kid, that is the ACA. If you have never received a letter saying your 18-year-old is being dropped, that is the ACA working exactly as intended. And millions of families were living inside that protection without ever once connecting it to the law they've been told to hate.
And the other thing that maybe people don't understand or know about is that prior to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, insurance companies were allowed to deny you benefits or kick you off of a plan if you had a pre-existing condition. So say, for example, you had diabetes and you needed to get a new insurance plan. Insurance companies were completely allowed to deny you coverage based on the fact that you had diabetes, because that was a pre-existing condition. They could either charge you an arm and a leg, so they charge you way more because you had diabetes, or they would just not take on your policy altogether. Or if you had a pre-existing condition and you didn't disclose that to insurance, and the insurance company found out that you had a pre-existing condition before you had switched over to that plan, they could drop you from that insurance plan. So they could kick you off of your benefits. And this got drilled into my head just as a matter of survival. But did you know that insurance companies considered pregnancy to be a pre-existing condition? You heard that right. Pregnancy was considered a pre-existing condition. So if you were pregnant and you had to switch insurance plans in the middle of your pregnancy, the new insurance plan could very well either cancel your application or deny you coverage, because they didn't want to have to pay for any of your prenatal care, for your labor and delivery costs, any of your post-delivery care, nothing. They didn't want to pay for it, so they were allowed to kick you off your insurance plan if you switched in the middle of a pregnancy. And so now when I hear people bemoaning the declining birth rate and how we don't have a sense of family values in America and declining nuclear families and shrinking family sizes, I think to myself, and these are the same people, by the way, who are rapidly foaming at the mouth to be like, Obamacare, it's socialism, get rid of it, rah! And these are the same people who do not realize that all of these protections that they enjoy are because of the Affordable Care Act. Like all these, people don't read, okay?
Pregnancy, a pre-existing condition. Read that again. A woman carrying a child, switching insurance plans, could be denied coverage for her prenatal care, her labor, her delivery, and her recovery because the new insurer didn't want to pay for a pregnancy that started before they took her on. Think about the politics of that for a second. The loudest voices calling for Obamacare's repeal are often the same voices talking about family values, declining birth rates, and the importance of the nuclear family. And yet, the system they want to return to is one where getting pregnant at the wrong moment, between jobs, between plans, will leave you financially exposed for one of the most expensive medical events of your life. You cannot say you support families and simultaneously support a system that treated pregnancy as a liability. The Affordable Care Act closed that contradiction. It said pregnancy is not a pre-existing condition. It is not a disqualifier. It is a life event that insurance must cover. That's a family value.
My premium went from like $190 to $912 because they took away the subsidies. And I won't even hold you, okay? We know that this is political, but I won't get into that because I refuse to argue with people on the internet. Waste of time. The point is, people are going to die from this. And I can tell you that because I'm a chronically ill person, a type 1 diabetic specifically. What's going to actually happen, because I went through this before Obamacare, people are going to start rationing their medication. Specifically, I'm going to go just based on my case. We're going to ration our insulin. We're going to avoid going to the endocrinologist because we can't afford it. We're going to avoid going to the ER until we absolutely have to, because diabetics will go into what's called diabetic ketoacidosis, which is life-threatening. So that immediate danger, but also people are going to lose longevity and quality of life left and right. That there are people who are like, well, I don't want my hard-earned tax dollars going to feed other people's kids or pay for other people's medical care. I work hard and I got to pay for my own. Your tax dollars go to so much other stupid shit that you should be more concerned about than helping people survive.
$912 for someone managing type 1 diabetes, a condition she was born with, a condition she cannot prevent or cure. Her monthly premium nearly quintupled when subsidies were cut. And she's not being dramatic when she says people are going to die. She's being precise. She has lived this. She knows exactly what happens when insulin-dependent diabetics can't afford their endocrinologist. They ration, they stretch doses, they skip appointments, they wait until their body is in crisis, until they're in a diabetic ketoacidosis, which is life-threatening, because they'll go to an emergency room they can't afford either. That is not a hypothetical. That is not a talking point. That is a medical reality that plays out every time coverage becomes unaffordable. And when someone responds to that by saying, I don't want my tax dollars paying for someone else's healthcare, she has the right to answer for that too. Your tax dollars fund a lot of things. The question is what kind of country you want to be. One that lets people ration insulin and die preventable deaths, or one that decided 15 years ago that we could do better.
So MAGA, you're upset now because now you're finding out that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are the same thing. You voted to get rid of Obamacare. I guess because you thought Obamacare was only for you know who. Not knowing that the Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are one and the same. It was the Republicans who told you and gave the Affordable Care Act the nickname Obamacare. They did it to scare you, and you fell for it. So you voted out of hate to try to get rid of something out of hate. But now you're not going to have health insurance.
And this is the part that should make you genuinely angry, regardless of your politics. The name Obamacare was not an accident. It was a weapon. Republicans coined it deliberately, used it relentlessly, and attached it to every culture war grievance they could find. Because they knew that if they could make the law feel like it belonged to the other side, people would oppose it without ever asking what was actually in it. And it worked. It worked extraordinarily well. There's a story out of Kentucky that proves exactly how well it worked.
This photo. This is about the time that Andy Bashir convinced more people in Kentucky, let's say about 400,000 to 500,000 people from Kentucky, to sign up for Obamacare by calling it Kynect, because 60% of people were against Obamacare, but only 20% were against Connect. And they were like, oh my God, this is great. It's a whole lot better than Obamacare. And when he left, it's like, did you tell him? It's like, well, I hesitated. I thought I should, but then I was like, nah, I'm just going to sign him up, because he wouldn't have gotten to the healthcare if it was called Obamacare.
Kentucky launched their ACA marketplace under a neutral name. They called it Kynect. No politics, no Obama, just a state insurance exchange. It signed up over 400,000 residents. 75% of them had been uninsured before. Then pollsters asked Kentucky voters what they thought of Obamacare. 57% unfavorable. Then they asked a different group what they thought of Kynect. The negatives dropped dramatically. Same program, same coverage, same law. Different name, completely different reaction. One voter said Kynect was a lot better than Obamacare. She was enrolled in Obamacare. She had no idea. And that's the entire story right there. Not stupidity, not ignorance, a deliberate sustained campaign to attach a name to a policy so that people would oppose it on instinct before they ever had a chance to find out what it actually did for them. You were handed a slur and told it was policy position. And now, as subsidies get cut and premiums spike and coverage disappears, people are finding out in the worst possible way that the thing they were told to hate was the thing standing between them and financial ruin. That's the story of Obamacare. That's always been the story.
One of the biggest things the Affordable Care Act did for us, and I say us because it literally helps every single American, even if you're one of the ones that try to call it Obamacare and act like it's shit, what it did is it made it so that you can't be treated differently due to pre-existing conditions. And you may think, well, I don't care about that. I don't have any fucking disease. Like all you chronically ill people, disabled people, you should have to pay more. I highly encourage you to look into all the things that can be used as pre-existing conditions and that were used as pre-existing conditions to deny people in the past. Because if you have a child, you have a pre-existing condition, pregnancy. If you ever had acne, you have a pre-existing condition. If you are overweight, you have a pre-existing condition. So there's most likely something in your life that they can use to turn around and say, well, you had this before, so you're now high risk. You got to pay all this money. Or even better, you're high risk. You're going to cost us money. We're not going to insure you. And so you can kind of see how that might really complicate things for you and people you love. Oh, and by the way, even if you used to struggle with something, like say you were struggling with issues with diabetes and now your diabetes is very well managed, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Oh, wait, did you used to be an alcoholic or have some kind of addiction? Even if you're clean now, you have a pre-existing condition. So maybe, just maybe, you should care about that because you have something they could use. Everyone you love has something that can be used. Like, I think some of y'all really need to look into what the Affordable Care Act actually did and what a lot of these helpful things were, because you benefit from them.
So what do you all think? Did you know before this that Obamacare was the same as the Affordable Care Act? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I would love to keep this discussion going. Otherwise, that's it from me. I also have another video specifically tailored for you. And if you enjoy such kind of content, please click up here and enjoy. Also, consider subscribing, liking and sharing because it helps me grow my channel and helps YouTube recommend this video to a wider audience. But for now, thank you so much for watching. And until the next time, the Joy Report out.